So, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Romain Charles, and today I will talk about this Mars500 experiment that happened a long time ago, let's say. Hopefully, all of you were born at that time, but I work a lot with students nowadays, and it's getting there. It's getting there. Just in a few words, Mars500 is a scientific mission that was organized by the Institute of Biomedical Problems in Russia, joined quickly by ESA, the European Space Agency, and then later joined by the Astronaut Center of China. And this mission, actually a set of missions, was trying to answer a big scientific question. Is man psychologically and physiologically able to endure the confinement of a trip to Mars? At the time, this word confinement was not that well understood. Nowadays, it's much easier to explain what was this experiment about. So, the final stage of this Mars500 mission was a 520 days confinement, simulating a round trip to Mars. So, once again, the question, is man able to endure the confinement of a trip to Mars? You can replace it by, are we able to spend 1.5 years confined together as a crew without killing each other and still working efficiently together? And the Mars500 mission was a success because basically, and that's really all it took for this mission to be a success, we were 6 when we entered, and we're still 6 when we exited 1.5 years later, and still working efficiently together. So here you can see the final crew for this Mars500 mission. I'm sure you can all read in the center, bottom center, our commander, Alexei Sityov. On his left is our crew surgeon, Sukhrob Kamolov. Top center, second medical doctor, but who was a mission specialist for our mission, Alexander Smolievsky. On the top left is our Chinese comrade, Van Yue. And on the right, the 2 European candidates that were selected by the European Space Agency, Diego Urbina, the bottom right, and myself, top right. Just to give you an idea, we had 2 medical doctors, 3 engineers, and 1 researcher in physiology, Van Yue. So, what happened for this mission? First, where did that happen? Our modules were inside a high bay in Russia, in Moscow. On the top right, you can see the modules as they were during this Mars500 mission. So if you came to see us during that period, that's what you would see from the outside. On the top left, you can see some schematics showing you the different modules. We had access to 3 big modules throughout the whole simulation. Those were our core modules. You had the biggest one, which is just below this red bubble, which was the storage module, but also had a greenhouse and gym. The second biggest and the most important for us is just parallel to it, is the habitable module. Living module, I would say. This is where we lived. This is roughly the size of a bus, if you have to imagine. And inside you had a control room, a bathroom, 6 rooms, a kitchen, and a living room, let's say. And the last one we had access to is the one which is perpendicular at the end, which is the medical module, which was kind of our work module, where we would do most of our experiments. Those modules, we had access to them throughout the mission. But it was a return trip to Mars. So at one point, Mars happened. And during that period, we had access to a new module. And this is the small one, which is at the end of the living module, this Mars landing ship, or we called it the Martian module. Inside this module, so we had access to this one for 1 month, and during that month, for 2 weeks, 3 of us went into further confinement and lived there for 2 weeks. During those 2 weeks, they had 3 EVAs of 2 hours, and they could access the big red bubble on top during those 3 EVAs. So 6 hours on the surface of Mars for 1.5 years of a trip. I think it's a good balance, let's say. At the bottom of this screen, you can see two pictures of the modules. Bottom left is actually our living room at the end of the living module. And this one, you can see at the back, this hatch is leading to the medical module. And the bottom right is the kitchen, our small kitchen. And you can see the hatch leading to the storage module just here. And yes, the chairs are on the table because I waited for the weekly cleaning to be done before I took those pictures to be put on this presentation. So it's all nice and shiny. So this is roughly, so first, now you know who was the crew for this Mars500 mission. Where did that happen? Now let's talk quickly about what happened. Well, let's step back a few weeks and months for the selection of the Mars500 mission. This selection was different for each entity, on the Russian side, on the Chinese side, and on the European side. On the European side, it started a bit like an astronaut selection. You would have to go on the internet, apply, give a lot of information, motivation. You would have to go through some medical check, just like for an astronaut selection. Then we had a phone interview. I found it quite easy. I think the main purpose was to make sure that we could understand and speak English. And the second was to make sure we understood what it was about. I later learned why, but I can explain that a bit later if you have questions. But basically it was, it is a 520 days mission. So in other words, you will be with the training and the post-flight, you will be away for 2 years. And I said, yes, I read the description of the mission. I am applying to that, yes. Okay, then we'll invite you for the psychological for the selection, psychological selection. Psychological selection was happening at the European Astronaut Center in Cologne. It was the first time in my life that I met real-life astronauts, so it was quite something. Still tough questions during this interview. After that, we were invited to Russia to do the medical control over there, 10 days in a Russian hospital. Not always the nicest things, but yeah, it's, I would say still usual for an astronaut selection. And after that is when it differs a little bit. For an astronaut selection, after you have interviews and you are selected, and years later you are assigned to a mission. Here, 11 candidates, if I'm counting well, 11, were invited to start the training. So we were already starting the training for the mission, yet we were not selected. So for 2 months, we trained all together about the modules, about the experiments that we would have to do inside the modules. We had some team bonding activities like this one, and only after 2 months, so 1 month before entering the module, they extract from those 11 candidates the final crew. And that differs a little bit from an astronaut selection. But, I mean, it proved to be efficient. Once again, I have too many stories to tell you about all those things. I want to go through that, and then please don't hesitate to come back to anything that you found interesting. Selection happened. I was lucky enough to be one of the 6 members. And on the 3rd of June 2010, 14 years ago, more than 14 years ago, the 6 of us entered the module. And you can see behind us, so you can recognize Diego, Alexei, Vanyoe, Alexander, Sukhrab, and myself. And behind me is the door of the storage module, not the nicest one, but that was the one that was facing the biggest area where press and officials could be invited. This door was closed and sealed, and we spent the rest of those 520 days inside our modules. What happened inside? Well, all of you kind of know that we do a lot of experiments. Our main purpose is to answer these big scientific questions. And to answer it, we have plenty of smaller questions that are put together, brought by PIs from all over the world. So our work was mainly to do psychological and physiological experiments, but not only. That was the bigger part, but not only. So here you have actually a German experiment called Pilot that was training us to learn, teaching us how to pilot a spacecraft to dock it to a space station. The question was, can you learn complex tasks in confinement, and can you keep a good level of a good skill level with those complex tasks? And all those electrodes on Diego's face is mainly to know if he's tense or not while learning, because I learned from this PI that if you are tense when you are learning, you are prone to do bigger mistakes. When you start to go in the wrong direction, it goes further than if you are chilled and just, oh, okay, I will catch up. But yeah, that's one psychological experiment about training, about teaching or learning. We had many experiments, 105 total. Some of them were a bit strange. I like to take this one. You may have seen this picture already. The title of this experiment is, I'm losing it now, pain tolerance. Basically, can you tolerate pain? And so you can see on my arm, I have this white plastic thing. It's like thermocouple, so it gets hotter and hotter and hotter, and I have a big red button, and I have to press it when it hurts. And you would ask, why would you do that to yourself? Well, actually, because I asked the PI about it, like, why do we have to go through that? And the question is very operations-oriented. When we imagine going on Mars, the astronauts that will arrive there will have to go through a lot of hours of EVAs to set up everything. And an EVA on Mars, it's not like on the ISS. I mean, it's already tough on the ISS, but on Mars, you have to carry the weight of your EVA, of your suit, spacesuit, on your shoulders and head, and for hours on. So if your pain tolerance evolves during the mission or during the trip, well, it could have some real operational implications. So it was just to make sure that the evolution of this pain tolerance was either neutral or that would be able to endure more, but not less, for sure. I didn't see the paper. I don't have the answer. I looked at which temperature I would press each time, and on my side, it was quite stable, I can tell you. But so hopefully we are fine. Confinement shouldn't have such a strong effect on pain tolerance. And don't worry, I made this face for the picture. I would press much earlier. Another physiological experiment was food. Food is very important. But on this one, you can see us all around the table. So welcome to our kitchen. I can tell you it was a picture that was taken at the beginning of our flight because we still had proper, like normal milk and normal orange juice. After that, it was only powder milk and powder orange juice. On the top left corner, you can see a little book. And actually, this little book was, each page of this little book was the menu that we had to eat every day. And that was hard. I don't know if in your experiments and missions you had to eat something, but when you lose that freedom of eating whatever you feel like at one point, it's kind of tough. But yeah, so this experiment was looking at our sodium absorption from the body and how it would actually be absorbed and released after. So we had a lot of urine and saliva and blood samples to give for that. It proved to be a quite good experiment on the papers that were written after. So once again, if you want to know more, don't hesitate. But that was a tough one also because the menu was not following the calendar. So for Christmas, for example, because it was an 8-month mission, like every day we had to eat what was written, and it was not too bad per se. But for Christmas, it was meatballs and broccoli. Not the most Christmassy meal that I ever had. Anyway, I wanted, because we're talking about habitat, to add a few additional pictures. So I will talk about another experiment that I think The science have moved further in this aspect, but at the time, blue light was thought to be a very strong, to have a very strong impact on our circadian rhythms. And the idea was to, after a year and 2 months inside the modules, it was assumed that our circadian rhythm would be completely chaotic and that we would need to reset before exiting the modules. So we had the blue light experiment, where we had blue light everywhere in the main areas, and it was switched on at 8 in the morning, switched off at 8 in the evening, and that was our reset of circadian rhythm. Didn't feel that efficient in my view, but at least you have a nice view of our living area towards the end of our mission, with most of the things that are our own. Once again, if you see anything interesting and you have questions, please go ahead. Another picture I wanted to show you is the greenhouse. So this is what our greenhouse looked like, with Alexander, who was the main point of contact, we would say nowadays, for this experiment. And just behind, you can imagine our gym. And it looks like it was set up for a VO2 max experiment, as we have all the equipment needed for that. Another picture that is less shown, I must admit, is my room inside Mars500. So this room, I can tell you, it was toward the end of the mission, so a year and a half inside the mission, because little things, something I tell people who goes to Antarctica for a winter over. My little sister did something that I found amazing. The last time I went to France, before entering those modules, she invited people, and it was like some nice gathering of friends, family, and all that. And in some corner, she put some envelopes with all the months of the mission written on them. And she asked people to put pictures, put little messages, little things, and put it at a certain period of time. So every month, she gave me all those envelopes saying, you open them only when it's written there. So I had to make sure. So at the beginning of the month, middle, I need to know because it's important. And it got more and more important throughout the mission. But each time there were some pictures, and by the end, my wall was completely covered with pictures from these little envelopes. But basically, this was our room. Cozy, I would say. It was big enough to be comfortable. We would spend more and more time in those rooms throughout the mission. The beds were specially made, which was not very easy. I used to sleep on my belly, but the beds were 1.85 m in length with 2 walls. I mean, 1 cupboard and 1 wall. And I'm 1.81, so I had 4 centimeters. And if I was on my belly, the feet would not fit. So I had to sleep on the back, but the width is 60 centimeters, which is the width of my shoulders. So the right arm was always full. So I had to learn to sleep with my arm like that, or to sleep on the side. Not the easiest at the beginning, but you get used to it. I mean, humans, they get used to a lot. So this is the module. These are the experiments, our work. Now, what happened during those 520 days? Well, when we entered, and I'm sure all of you had experienced that if you did some mission, you arrive, you're full of energy. Yes, we'll do this, and we are ready for it. It was the same for us. And it lasted for 1 month, and then we learned to work together, and we found some routines that would work. And little by little, those routines will become a bit more monotonous, and then a bit more boring. So from time to time, we would try to break this monotony with events. So here, it's Halloween. A few days before, we decided, why not putting on some costumes for that day, and in the evening, we'll watch some scary movies. And that's what we did. And it would break this monotony. It would bring back some energy to continue the mission and still have enough energy to do all the tasks that were a bit more monotonous by now. Sometimes, so those events, we would plan them. Sometimes they would fall upon us. So here you cannot see a lot, and it's normal. It was on the 1st of December 2010. we were doing our work and we're about to go for our lunch all together in the little kitchen, and all of a sudden, poof, no more power. And no more power for us, it means no more ventilation, no more water, it was working with pumps, and no more light except for the security lights. And we received quickly after a message from the control center saying, oh, we had a fire in the main fuse cupboard. I don't remember the technical term. We have called a technician. We don't know when he will arrive. Good luck, basically. So we had to handle the cold storage, we had to handle the lights, we had to handle a few other things. We calculated quickly that with our volume of air, the carbon dioxide would not be an issue before several days, so we're fine with that. And so when it happened, not so nice. But later, so we stayed for 22 hours in the dark like that. Later on, when we would think about this moment, it was different. And it became kind of positive because it was different. It was breaking that monotony. It broke this monotony, even though it started a bit negative. And then one day plus one day plus one day, we are already on the 1st of February 2011. And finally, Mars. It's Mars500, that was our goal. And Mars was great for two reasons. First one is a symbol. It's Mars500. That's a round trip to Mars. That's the whole purpose of this experiment. So we were there, finally, there. I hope you saw the brackets. And the other reason why it was great is that all of a sudden, we had access to a new module, something new after 8 months of having the same people, same things, same kind of food, of experiments. A new module, and because in our virtual scenario, the Martian lander was waiting for us on orbit around Mars. Nobody was inside, so they filled the habitable space with all the food and equipment that we would need for the return trip. So all of a sudden, new food, new equipment, even some gifts from our friends and family. That was Christmas. That was amazing. It was an awesome day. But quickly, we had to take all those things and put them in the storage module because it was time for our Martian crew to actually land on Mars. Once again, brackets. And our Martian crew, here they are. You have Vanue, Diego and Alexander representing our different agencies. And yeah, I'm sure that you noticed that Vanue is holding his country's flag upside down. I mean, on the wrong side. Fun fact, there was a book that was printed after the mission in Chinese in China with his blog post and a few additional information from scientists. This picture is still a nice one, so they took this picture, they modified the flag, and they printed it. So, as I said, our Martian crew were 3 times on EVA on this Martian surface. The first EVA was mainly going there, telling some inspiriting words, planting their flags, doing some movements. The spacesuit were Orlan E spacesuit, so it's like the Orlan that are used. So the Russian spacesuit already used on the ISS. It was a similar concept, a bit more mobile on the legs part, and the whole life support system thing was just plugged. So it was not really autonomous. But that was the base for our spacesuit. And the main tasks were what you would do when you arrive on your place on Mars: collect some rocks, drill some holes, say a few inspiring things, and plant a flag. That's what they did during their EVAs. Then, a few days later, at the beginning of Mars, but the month this time, we started our trip back. So we abandoned the Martian lander, and we went back into our 3 main modules, and it started. And this picture is a bit boring, because that's how it felt for me. The return trip from Mars to Earth. Mars was behind us. Now we just had 8 months to come back. And so just to give you an idea, this is a picture taken from the kitchen with the hatch to the storage module. And in front of you, you have the corridor with all our rooms, the control room, and at the very end, the bathroom and the access now closed to the Martian lander. I'm trying to, there were difficult or more difficult moments throughout the whole mission for all of us. We have all had ups and downs. And for me, one of the down is, just looking at the time. I do have some time? Cool. Was in August, September 2011. So 1 year and 2 months into the mission. And reflecting on it, I think there were 3 main reasons for that. The first one is work. For the work, we had a lot of experiments, but scientists, they wanted to see an evolution. So we had to repeat the same experiments over and over again. The most frequent was every day. Most of them, it was every 2-3 weeks, but still, after a year and 2 months, going through the same protocol with the same subject, it became, it was weighing a little bit on the shoulders. The second reason was food. Food is important. We all know that. Food, so we had this experiment for 8 months. When we arrived on Mars, new food. Oh, that was amazing. We could try, and we were free to eat whatever we wanted. That was amazing. However, we had a limited stock. So we didn't want to jeopardize the stocks, and we were given a menu that would fit those stocks. The issue with this menu is that it was a weekly menu. So every Monday was the same food. Every Tuesday, the same thing. There were some variations into it. For example, I think it was on Wednesday lunchtime, we had tuna that was proposed as the main protein food. And in our stocks, we had tuna with oil and tuna with water. And everybody loved tuna with oil. And after 2 months, no more tuna with oil. So little by little, all those variations that we had, we would lose them. It was still good per se, but it was getting more and more the same, boring. And it would add some more weight on the shoulders. The third reason is a bit more personal. It was about communicating with the outside. We didn't have the internet, we didn't have direct access, but we could send messages to our family and friends through mission control, and then they would spread it to our family and friends. And I was relying a lot on that. I would spend 2 to 3 hours every evening to read all the messages that I had received and write like letters from the past century, the long ones describing everything. That's what I would do every evening, and I was relying a lot on that. And in August, my family and friends, well, they were on holidays, so didn't have their computer with them. In September, it was back to work, back to university, to school, and once again, not so much time to write messages and to answer. And I understand. The fact is that during this period, I had 3 times less messages than the rest of the mission. And to me, this made, this was, I would say, the last drop in a way, but this made this period much more difficult to do the activities that I had planned for myself, to do this extra step, to start those activities. I wanted to improve my Russian, to read some technical books. I didn't have the energy for that. But luckily, we all had ups and downs, but not at the same time. So as a crew, we could help each other to go through that, and actually they helped me a lot without realizing it at the time. I realized it much later, that they helped me a lot during this period. And so we would have this crew and those events, like birthdays, like those ones. This is a picture of Alexei's birthday, which is in April. And for birthday, quickly enough, we had some little traditions that were set. And even though we were only 6, we had 10 birthdays inside the module. So a lot of occasions to celebrate. And how would we do that, at the beginning, we all had stacked a few little things that we could offer. But after a year and some, we didn't have anything left to offer. So we would just go to the storage room and bring the food that we knew they liked, like here, some, tuna with oil for you. But no, it worked well. And once again, it was breaking this monotony and bringing back some energy that would allow us to continue the mission. And 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1, etc. We arrive at 520. And on the 4th of November 2011, we finally exited the modules. This day was amazing. It started a bit tense because, you don't want to mess up exiting after 1 year and a half. But once, all the official things were done, it was just about rediscovering plenty of little things that I didn't even realize I was missing. For example, we spent an hour or two at the IBMP in the high bay where the modules were. And then, because they didn't know how our immune system was, the hypothesis was that it would be weak, like the astronauts coming back from the ISS. So we were sent to a hospital to stay in quarantine for 4 days as soon as we exited. And on the trip, we're all 6 inside a van, and we were driven through Moscow, and we're just looking at the windows and calling each other like, look, a dog, look, a baby. Things that we didn't see for a year and a half. We didn't even realize that we were missing them. And I still remember next morning we had to wake up early to do a blood draw, and I could see my first sunrise in almost in a year and a half, and it's printed there. I can still remember going from dark blue to light blue to kind of purplish, and then orange and red, red, orange, and yellow bright, with those big Soviet towers in the background around the hospital. But still, it was beautiful. And just to quickly follow up on all that, thanks to this experience, Mars500, I was fortunate enough to find a position at the European Astronaut Center as a crew support engineer. So my role was to facilitate the daily life of the astronauts so they can focus on their mission. And one of the tasks I had to do was to support the astronaut when they were landing in Kazakhstan. So that was for the return of Thomas Pesquet, the French astronaut. I learned a lot, and I could see some of the experience I had during Mars500 in the astronauts. One of them, food, of course. The first-time flyers say, you can have some bonus food if you want, like something really for you for big events. Said, I can eat anything, it's fine. And when they come back after a 6-month mission, it's so important. I will tell all the others. they have to choose some good food. It's really, really important over there. I was also, and I wanted to share with Bill a bit, had the chance to be certified as a Eurocom, so part of the flight control team on the European side. So you can see here in Munich. Sorry, in Oberpfaffenhofen. After these years working close to the astronauts, I went to Toulouse to help CNES develop a structure which is called Spaceship FR. And without entering into too much detail, a year and a half ago, so 2 years and a half after arriving in Toulouse, I moved to the UK to coordinate another spaceship, the spaceship EXAT. EXAT stands for European Centre for Space Applications and Telecommunications. It's the ESA, European Space Agency site in the UK, basically. And so what are those spaceships? Well, it's our ambition, all those spaceships, our common ambition is to prepare the future of space exploration. So you already have big programs, ISS, the Gateway, the Artemis, all that have their budget and everybody's working to make it happen. What comes just after is where we try to be, especially with young actives like most of this room. Sorry, Bernard, not you. Well, you're always part of everything. We know that. So those spaceships, we really want to look at the technology gaps that still exist, look at the new technologies from the space world, but not only, and see if they have potential. And we want to try them in a pragmatic way, with little rovers, with Regolith simulant, all that. And I am more than happy to go into the details of that. But for today, I think that will be all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Romain. Really, I'm so glad to have all these different speakers because each of you brings so much to this weekend, honestly, and have all of you contributed incredible achievements. So first thing, thank you for everything. I always wondered, obviously I heard about your mission for a long time. I remember, I think I was 11 or 12 when they made a call saying, do you want to go to Mars and be in isolation, you know? And then hearing about your mission. And I always wondered, you know, when we say, how much time do we have free? How much holidays do we spend for those missions? And it's only finding a year and a half or almost 2 years, actually, because of the training, free. And thinking you're not even going to the bloody planet, you know? Like, you won't even set foot, you're just going to be simulating. How do you psychologically bring the strength to do that? You know, what for you makes it worth it? Is it for humanity? Is it something new? Like, what is it?
So I have plenty of anecdotes to tell you. First, when I saw it, in my view, seeing in front of whom I am today, I was nowhere near where you are. I was a nobody. I was a quality engineer in the automotive industry, but I loved space, and I had for many years. So I just wanted to get closer. So when I applied for Mars500, I had two motivations. The first is that I believed it was an important question that needed to be answered, and I wanted, if I could, to help pave the way going to Mars. The second is much more selfish. I thought I would love to work in the space industry, and if it could be in human spaceflight, that would be amazing. Maybe if I apply, in my head there was no way I would be taken. Like, I'm nobody, I don't have any connection. So I applied thinking if I go through maybe the first step, I could get to know some people that could point me to the right place or the right website or to find a job. And I would just be super happy and give my all at every step, because for me that was the last one. And then I would be called back, and I was like, yeah. Fun fact, I applied, and then I talked about it to my family and friends. And some friends would say, oh yeah, that's great, 1 year and a half inside the can, that's a super mission, future, Mars and everything. Most of my family and friends would say like, why? Why do you want to go away for so long from us? And the chance I had is that they tried to understand. They didn't tell me, don't do it. I mean, except for my grandfather, who was claustrophobic. But that was really a chance, because from the very beginning, I had to explain to the people closest to me why I thought it was a good thing, in general and for myself. So during this psychological interview, I was asked these same kind of questions. I already answered them in the past, so it came, I assume, a bit more easily, which helped me. Once again, I assume, I don't know, to get through the next step. But important point, we were invited to start the training. We're still 11, and we're 4 Europeans. And within those 4 Europeans, there was one guy, Belgian guy, who was brilliant and great and had already some good knowledge about the space world. And when this came up, he said, I would like to apply, and he had the support from his whole family, who is already linked more or less to the sector. And he went through all the steps, and he was in Russia. We're together, and we would share a lot. We got along very well together. And at some point, we're sitting, and he was thinking, like, you know, if it gets hard, what do I have for myself? I love my job that I have today, and my girlfriend, and I mean his wife now. And if it gets hard, what will I have to helped me go through. And I think that's the moment when he kind of parted away, and he was not selected in the end. And I assume it's because of this questioning. He didn't have this selfish motivation in a way. So yeah, you should really ask yourself: is it really what you want? And then you talk about it around you. No, don't do that. It may not have been the best way. I just have a lot of luck. I'm very happy to have such a family around me.
Thank you for a great, amazing presentation, and there was so much to learn. So I had a couple of questions, like also related to psychology. One question is, if there is a serious family emergency, were you allowed to exit?
That's a very good question. Actually, that's a question we were asked before the mission. We were doing a scientific experiment, so we were allowed to exit whenever we wanted, but we were selected because we wanted to stay until the end. And that was, for me, the question I didn't know how to answer. I was thinking and imagining, if anything like that happens, what will I do? Do I want to be with my family when such a dreadful event happens? Do I stay here with everything that, all the consequences that it may have over a long period with the family? Luckily enough, I didn't have to make a decision. But for me, definitely, that's one of the big questions that I would have. But we were not locked, so we were allowed to exit if we wanted to.
Okay. Thank you. That was the first question, and I had one more question. There have been, you mentioned that, psychologically also that you had ups and downs, and you felt there were monotony at some point, and after a while returning from Mars, you had limited interaction with your friends because they didn't have the computer during holidays, and so this also demotivated you a bit to learn Russian or whatever you have planned for yourself. Mm-hmm. So I have one very question in the sense that if someone is bit spiritual or do meditation and things like that, are they allowed to do that? Were they allowed to do that in this mission? And the follow-up question is if there is any place where they support this kind of things to help maintain the psychological balance of astronauts. Because I would say an anecdote that there were I think there was a psychological experiments where they invited monks from Dalai Lama in US, and they did MRI scans on the brain, mm-hmm. and they saw a lot of gamma radiation, which reflected they were very happy because they were doing meditation and they were living a spiritual life. So is that we are all scientists and engineers, so it's it may not be it may be a difficult question, but
it is a good question. Before entering the modules, we were trained with two kind of coping mechanisms. One was meditation. It was called auto training, and it was an experiment. The person who was training us was trying to find 3 subjects that would do it throughout the mission, and 3 who would not. I pushed hard to be not doing it because of my personality. I didn't feel like I needed that. And another one, which was called the clutch method, which is revolving around big movements, but this one was just to give us a tool if need be. But so one experiment was about meditation, and the other one was about it's not really meditation, but coping with stress and all that. So we had that, yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
I got the mic here.
I think there was a question before over there, but if there is enough time, I'm happy to answer both.
Okay, congratulations, very impressive. I have a question related to conflicts. How did you actually deal with conflicts in the team?
So conflict, we were lucky that we never had a conflict. We had tensions, mainly due to cultural differences, but it never went to the point of a conflict, at least within the crew. And so, yeah, the one I remember the most is the one I had with one of the crew members, and it was around food. No, sorry, meals, to be more exact. So we would have our meals in the kitchen, and for me, as a French, I like to eat and exchange and share about the day, and it's a joyful event to eat. And one of the crew members on the Russian side, by tradition, by education, the meals are silent, and only at the end would they share and discuss. So the mission started, and would share, and I would ask and talk and everything, and sometimes he would not answer, or very briefly, and that was fine. But after a few months, one day, I asked him a question, and he didn't answer. So I asked him the question again, and he didn't answer. So I asked him the question again, and he said, "Stop it! Can't you see you're bothering me?" It was another language, but with your questions, and I was like, "Whoa, yes, okay, sorry, I didn't want to make you angry." And the end of the meal was kind of awkward, like that. And after the meal, just a few minutes later, I went into my room, and 10 minutes later, he came, and that was the main point. He said, "Yeah, no, sorry, I was a bit rough, but you have to understand, at home it's silence during my meal, so with your questions, it was a bit too much." And I understood, okay, well, sorry, for me, the meal is the moment when we talk. So once we understood that, we just found some compromises. He would come earlier to eat when there is nobody, so it's quiet, and would stay a bit longer with us to exchange. Or I would just refrain to ask him questions, and I would talk with the others, and I would talk to him toward the end of the meal, and it went well for the rest of the mission. But yeah, cultural differences was definitely the main source of tensions at the beginning. But personally, I believe that it helped in the long run, because it was a wealth of subjects. We would talk about everything and anything, and in a year and a half, we didn't have time to cover all the subjects. So it's bad at the beginning, but if you can overcome it, I think it's good to have such a difference. You want to? I don't know who wanted the last one. I thought Stefania wanted it, but... It's coffee break, okay. So I'm standing between you and the coffee. That's not a good place to be.
Yeah, unless you want to stay longer. I think they also have very relevant questions. I have more of a personal question, because your life changed so much after that, and during that transition as well. How has it impacted your career, and actually, do you use the experience that you got there in your day-to-day job?
So Mars500 changed my life. Yes, indeed. Two things. I don't think it changed me as a person. There was a case soon after Mars500. I went back to France, and I was invited. ISA prepared like a grand tour around Europe to talk about the experience. And I met with my brother, who was living in Paris, and went to a restaurant. And there somebody came to me and said, "Excuse me, are you Romain Charles, the guy who did Mars500?" And it was the first time I was recognized, in normal life. And I was like, "Yes." And said, "Oh, I'm so happy, because a few years ago I had an experience that is quite close to what you lived, and it changed me profoundly. I was very sick, and I couldn't leave my room for 2 years. And I wanted to ask you, this experience, did it change you as deeply as it changed me?" And I didn't know what to answer. I thought, I don't think so. Luckily, I had my brother in front of me, so I said, "Am I different?" And he told me, "Well, you are whiter and a bit thinner, but otherwise you look like the same person." And I think that was the purpose of this experiment too, because as a crew, we didn't evolve that much personally, so our interaction stayed quite stable, and that helped us to go through the whole mission. So as a person, I don't think I changed, and that was good, but I gained a lot of experience, and it unlocked for me so many things. So yeah, it completely changed my life in all layers.
Okay, and on a day-to-day basis in your career?
On a day-to-day basis, so when I was doing crew support for the astronauts, I would use it a few times, comparing some of the experience I had to try to send a message to the astronauts. Nowadays, the spaceship XSAT, I don't think, is at a stage where we are not as far as Christian in trying to predict or to prepare habitats with humans inside. But each time that I think about humans in the loop, I refer to some of the stories. A year and a half, we have a lot of anecdotes, and often they can fuel some conversation or some thoughts that hopefully help design better devices. But I wouldn't say that I use it every day. Thank you.